Hey, Loser Mister here. I'm here to talk to you about the newest Final Fantasy series, Final Fantasy 15. It's been 10 long years have fans waited for the newest Final Fantasy series, where it was initially announced in the early 2006 when the PS3 was just released. It has finally come out to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Final Fantasy 15, or initially dubbed Final Fantasy Versus 13, is the 15th installment of the very famous Japanese role-playing game developed by Square Enix. Separating itself from its predecessor, Final Fantasy 15 incorporates many new gameplay mechanics, such as an intense action-based battle system seen in games like Kingdom Hearts, where you'll be finding yourself hacking and slashing through opponents and enemies that's wildly different from the old traditional turn-based system in the old Final Fantasy series. One of the other newest things you'll be seeing in the Final Fantasy 15 series is a vast new open world that you'll find yourself admiring time and time and again during your adventures, with a large variety of side quests and many other things to do, such as cooking, fishing, camping, and driving. With all these new changes, Final Fantasy 15 aims to widen their audience by offering new mechanics that new fans will enjoy but feel familiar enough that the fans of the old Final Fantasy games will enjoy just as much. The story of Final Fantasy 15 takes place in the world of Eos, where the evil empire of Niflheim begins seizing all the world's countries under the kingdom of Insomnia. The game opens as Noctis, the prince of Insomnia, is being sent off by his father, the king of Insomnia, to travel alongside with his three companions, Ignis, the trusty advisor, Prompto, his longtime friend, and Gladios, his loyal guard, to Alstesia, where he's to be wed to his fiancée, Lunafreya of Tenebride. Once news travels that his father had just passed and the kingdom of Insomnia had been overthrown, Noctis and his friends are set off on an adventure to recover all the king's weapons and seek aid and gain the power of the gods, called Astrals, in order to overthrow the evil empire and return balance to the world of Eos. The narrative structure and tension arc of Final Fantasy 15 follows that of a linear narrative. But there are segments in the story where it does offer the ability to make different dialogue choices when interacting with certain characters in different parts of the story, although none of them actually make any or little changes to the story at all. The main story of Final Fantasy 15 is probably one of the weakest parts of the game, and can be finished as quickly as 20 hours if you rush through everything. There are many plot holes, leaving players wondering what had just happened even when the game ends and the credits are rolling. There are many parts of the game where they show one thing and they wouldn't explain it, leaving me going on places like YouTube and Google to get some sort of explanation. I'm sure that they're leaving these parts open for DLCs, but as a game I'm very disappointed that they could not incorporate this in the main game, especially for a game that has been in development for 10 years. Final Fantasy 15 is probably hard for people to follow if you've not watched the movies Kingsglaive or the anime series, The Final Fantasy 15 Brotherhood, where they explain most of the characters' backstories and story setting. If you haven't watched it yet, many of the story plots and settings may be hard for you to follow because they don't actually repeat them in the game, and the relationship between the prince and his companions may be hard to comprehend due to lack of context. Instead of them feeling like your best friends, they feel like characters that are just there, which hardly makes you feel like you have any sort of emotional connections to them. If they could have added these in the main game, this could have been one of the strongest stories in the Final Fantasy game franchise, in my opinion. The main mechanics of Final Fantasy is different this time around, when the team of Square Enix sought to create a more realistic experience. First of all, with many complaints of linearity of the previous Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy 15 incorporates a vast new open world, where players are able to travel around using the car Regalia. You can also travel on foot, or large chickens named Chocobo, making it very familiar to players who have played games such as Grand Theft Auto or any other open world games. With incorporating this new open world, it makes players feel like they're actually traveling in a real place that could exist. As for the main battle mechanics, Final Fantasy 15 incorporates a new action-based real-time battle system, also known as Active Cross Battle System, where you're only able to use Noctis to fight. Instead of the old traditional menu system in old Final Fantasy 15 provides you the ability to attack, defend, use magic, and items using specific buttons on the controller. When attacking enemies, you have the ability to pierce through enemies by warping into them with a chaotic strike, making it very satisfying to fight enemies this time around. You're also provided with 4 equipment slots, which are seen at the bottom left of the screen. These equipment slots are used to equip with any weapons or magic flasks containing magic in them, which are interchangeable at any time using the arrow keys. The only way you're able to gain magic this time is by heading off into nearby camping grounds, where there are elemental areas where Noctis has the ability to absorb them and put them into these magic flasks. Funny thing about magic this time is, since Square wanted to have a more realistic experience, when you actually use magic, you're gonna hurt your companions, so be careful. After each battle, characters are able to earn experience, which are used for characters to gain levels, making their stats stronger. Funny thing this time around is that experience and AP do not actually take effect right away after each battle. In order for characters to actually earn these, players must either camp in specific locations in the world or go to inns in the cities. Depending on the places that you actually rest, you can earn more experience more than other places and gain AP as you level up. Also, items and gills are not gained by battling random monsters anymore, but by accepting various side quests such as taking photos, hunting specific monsters, fishing, collecting certain items, which are provided for you all around the world when you go into different areas in EOS. Although they call them side quests, they're pretty mandatory because it's the only way you're actually going to get items and gills. Many of the side quests are very tedious and repetitive, making it very boring to complete. For tutorials on the mechanics, Final Fantasy 15 doesn't really hold your hands in the beginning, such as give you ideas on how to use the buttons. In order for you to learn how to fight, they give you an option in the beginning. Either you take the full-on tutorial and learn all the buttons and how to attack, dodge, and use specific skills, or later on when you're playing the game, you can camp on specific sites and you're given the option to go back into the full tutorial. The secondary mechanics of Final Fantasy 15 are that characters have specific skills that they can level up by doing specific tasks, such as Noctis, he can go fishing, Ignis by cooking, Gladios is a survival, so by staying alive in battles he can level up, and Pronto, if he takes more pictures he can level up. Although it's a welcome feature in the game, it does little or add any kind of value in making the gameplay more interesting. Final Fantasy 15 reward system follows that of an MMORPG, where you have many side quests you must complete in order to gain experience and collect various items. Many of the Final Fantasy 15 rewards are scattered throughout the world of EOS and can be collected by traveling around the vast open world. If you're a person who has the patience to travel around, many of the most important items can be found early on in the game. Rewards are more fixed intervals schedule and fixed ratio schedule. As John Hobson discussed in his article Behavioral Game Design, fixed intervals is when rewards appear at a specific time, which is what happens in Final Fantasy 15 since most rewards are gained by accomplishing quests at any time of the game, and also fixed ratio because depending on the side quests that you finish, you'll gain specific items. Also, other ways players can earn rewards is by locating these hidden dungeons that are located across EOS. Within these dungeons, they offer strong weapon items or healing items, and also strong optional boss fights that make it really rewarding for players that are completionists and want to complete 100% of the game. Rewards can also come in variable ratios in Final Fantasy 15, which is described by John Hobson in Behavioral Game Design as a reward that comes in different proportions every time. For example, in Final Fantasy 15, variable ratio shows up when fighting monsters. The better combos that you actually use during battle, the more experience points you get, versus just hacking or slashing your way around the game if you're super overpowered in the game. For the economic system, just like in previous installment games of Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy 15 players must actually acquire guilds, which are used as currencies in the game in order to purchase item goods, weapons, food, and also items for your vehicles this time around, such as music and decal. You're also able to sell these items back to the store, but at a lower cost of course. To acquire guilds is different this time around. Instead of the traditional ways such as acquiring guilds by battling monsters, you must do a large variety of side quests, which requires you to defeat certain monsters, fishing, taking pictures, and collecting items for people around Eos in order to gain those items and guilds. Final Fantasy 15 feedback loop is an example of positive feedback loop. For example, Ernest Adam and Joris Dormain explains in their book Game Mechanics Advanced Game Design that it's a system output that drives the system. Output changes then increase towards a certain outcome. For example, the more that you invest in the game, the more guilds that you acquire, the better weapons that you can acquire, which increases your stats, and outputs that you're gonna have way more fun in towards the games later on. Final Fantasy 15 delivers a compelling narrative but suffers due to lack of context and too many plot holes, which I hope they actually fix later on in the future updates. The new action-based battle system is intense and super fun. The more that you invest in developing your own reaction times, the better you actually become at maneuvering through the game, which makes it that much more rewarding. The new open world and side quests are a welcome change, but due to lack of variety of interesting side quests, they can seem pointless at times after a certain while. Overall, Final Fantasy 15 is a good game that old fans and new fans can come to enjoy, but if you do lack patience to collect items and do a lot of side quests, then this game might not be right for you.